We're going to start because, as Wendy was alluding to a minute ago, we have a habit of trying to cram far more than 50 minutes worth of stuff into 50 minutes. So we'll try and go a bit pacey on this. For those of you who don't know, well, you can see in Zoom, my name's Paul. What I really like doing is working with people who want to go beyond the basics of clean. I've always thought it's like, one of my values is technical excellence. Everything I do, it's like a bit of a craft. I kind of want to polish it and improve it. And one of the ways I find is really good to do that is to help others do the same. So we do a lot of things, Wendy and I, around how do we help people learn this more effectively, quicker, and how do we like push the edge of what clean is as well. So that's the kind of stuff I love doing. And so we try and do a session at this forum every year on whatever we think is new and interesting for us. And Wendy.
So I've all those things that Paul said, and I've been involved in clean from sometime in the last century, and have been offering trainings since on a regular basis since 2002. I feel, given what was said in the setting up for the block of sessions, where a whole lot of people were mentioned as having a book that they'd written, but that didn't happen with our session. I'm going to just say that along with Judy, the great and wonderful Judy, for whom we owe thanks for this whole Metaforum, I too have written a book on clean language. So she and I wrote it, I don't know, more than 10 years ago now. And so all the things I do are clean. I am registered as a psychotherapist. I also coach and teach clean, do some consultancy, market research projects where they're wanting some clean input, and some work with teams. So clean is the central strand of all of that. So let's get on then, shall we, with what we're doing today. What we're doing is considering this issue of how come sort of clean masters, Penny and James come to mind, can get on and get their clients working in metaphor utterly effortlessly in no time at all. Whereas for some of the rest of us, it's more a case of you arrive at a trendy club of metaphor, and the bouncers usher in the great clean masters. But when it comes to some of the rest of us, it's no, your name's not on the list. How does this happen, and what can we do to change things? In any training, any discussion with in a supervision session with people who are still finding their feet with clean, and with many who would say they have found their feet, the two things that come up over and over are what best to ask questions of, and how do you get clients into metaphor. And so we've developed a tool which takes a slightly different perspective on what's the most valuable thing to ask about, which we're calling a clean word net. And we've been using it for the last couple of years or so with people, and finding that it really does help people to get clean more quickly, and to be able to model more successfully. And by the way, get clients working in metaphor much more easily. And so that's what we're wanting to focus on today. It's part of a bigger tool that we call Modeler's Mind, which is a kind of process framework for teaching people how to make coaching decisions on what question to ask, question by question. The thing we want to say to everyone about this model is treat it as a model that can be useful to you. Don't spend too much time worrying about getting it exactly right. Pretty much everything involving metaphor even the experts of the experts are not in full agreement about. I'm not just talking clean, I'm talking more broadly. So let go of it being absolutely right and use it to inform your question asking. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, so when you say what we're going to be doing, so the word net's made up of 2 dimensions. So it's like a dimension going up and a dimension coming across. So it makes like a net shape. And we'll explain why that metaphor a little bit later. So we're going to explain the 2 dimensions of it separately. We'll do some interactive stuff with you on each of the dimensions. Then we're going to explain how those 2 fit together to form this word net. We'll demo it, and we're crossing our fingers that we've got enough time to let you go into breakout rooms and have a practice with each other. So I'll start and I'm going to share a slide. We're using some slides, but they're mainly to do examples. So here we go. So the first dimension, there's something that, and this is about what to notice. So the client said something to you, and what you're going to do is notice things about what they've said, because the word net is kind of about catching words, about catching what are important, useful words that you might ask something about. And the first dimension is what we call abstract specific. So in every word or every phrase that the client says, in some way, we're going to be encouraging you and training your mind just to notice, is this a really abstract word? And abstract means, it's vague, or it's general, it's not very specific in some way, or is it a very specific word, or somewhere in the middle? So again, it's not about getting it right, it's just that little bit of noticing about, it's very abstract, very specific, somewhere in the middle. So let me give you an example of that. So here we go. So I have a car. So a car is probably somewhere in the middle. You'll see in a second from the other example. Let's say somewhere in the middle. It's not particularly specific what that car is, but there are more abstract things. So we'll see in a second. So let's go a little bit more specific. So the car I have is a Nissan, and we could get more specific. It's actually a Nissan Qashqai, and we can get more specific, which is it's a silver Nissan Qashqai. I'll explain why I put that silver separately in a second. And we can get even more specific. And there we go, which is a picture of it. So as the client's saying something to you, you can kind of get a sense of whereabouts is the word or the phrase that someone's just said to you on this scale. And things can be more abstract as well. So rather than a vehicle, and of course that covers lots of other boats and lorries and things, or one of the most abstract things, a thing. And we get those action sessions. People say, there's something I know about. That's one of the most abstract words you can get. And the reason, by the way, why I put silver down the bottom, what we sometimes notice happens as you get to this more specific level, you'll notice you start getting attributes. The silver is more like an attribute of the car. We're going to come back to that later. So this is the first distinction that we're going to encourage you to have a bit more awareness of as your client's speaking to you. It's like how abstract, how specific. So we're going to do a little interactive thing with a group to practice this. So open to all, so unmute yourselves. I'm about to show you something, and can you just give me a word, the really obvious answer about, sorry, I missed something. We added this in last night. A few more examples of the abstract things. The things that are abstract, as well as the word something. If people talk about emotions or categories or labels for an entire experience, so words like, I'm happy is actually quite abstract, because you don't really know what's going on for that person under the label of happy. So there's a lot of inquiry you could do to get more specific. Categories of entire experience like justice or communication, another emotion like fear. People often have energy in sessions, they're working with their body. That's quite an abstract word. It's just noticing that in a minute we're going to show you what to do with those kind of words. So if you notice something, the point of noticing this is you can do something with it. So noticing that words are more towards the abstract end or more towards that specific end is going to come in handy in a moment. So, love as well. That's quite abstract, but we enter that one. So, would anyone like to give the obvious answer to what is this?
Puppet.
Monkey puppet.
Monkey puppet. Monkey puppet. Excellent. Okay, so we've got monkey. We've got sorry. Okay, got to switch modes on PowerPoint, and we've got. Did you say?
A monkey puppet.
Monkey puppet. I'm going to argue. Is there? Okay.
I said a puppet.
You did. I'm going to choose one because I'm going to have to choose one for what we're about to do. I'm going to go with monkey. So that's all right. Because what I'm going to ask you to do is, can you give me, just to practice what we've just done, can someone give me a more abstract word?
Animal.
Animal, brilliant. And any other abstract words? Is there anything in between, maybe?
Mammal.
Primate.
Hey.
It's a good one. And what about, so we've got more specific, so a monkey puppet is actually more specific.
Yeah, I saw fuzzy brown.
Ah, nice. Fuzzy brown.
A furry thing.
A furry thing. Virtual post-it. Ah, no, there you've done interesting things.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm going to go with. So sometimes we break these down. So we've got furry. Where would people think furry is? Is that quite specific, quite abstract?
Quite abstract.
Oh,
If I say furry, can people get a sense of what that might feel like on their skin?
It's an attribute.
It's an attribute, but the thing made it quite abstract.
Well, yeah, so that's the thing. So
exactly.
So the furry is an attribute, and it's probably actually reasonably specific. If you imagine it, you've probably got a reasonably good, what furry feels like is likely to be reasonably similar to what someone else's furry feels like. So it's quite specific. But when you said furry thing, so what we do is say, oh yeah, thing up there. So sometimes when the client says like a couple of words to you, one bit might be really abstract, one bit might be quite specific. Okay. And that's the thing with it. We're showing you this in quite a formal way with like lots of boxes. And then but the point is just your brain's getting a little bit about, oh, that word's quite abstract, that phrase quite abstract. And just getting the distinction going, right? It's not about getting it right. It's about doing a bit of thinking on it. Okay. So that's
the fact that you could make massive mistakes in exactly what thing meant to somebody else is a bit of a clue that it's more abstract than a thing like monkey. When you got a furry monkey, you're not going to be likely to make as massive a mistake as to what they're talking about. So it goes further down in specificity.
cool. Right. So having made this distinction, which you're probably reasonably familiar with, we're playing with it a bit so you can get a little bit of practice. It's harder when hundreds of words are coming out of the client's mouth in quick succession, I will say. So we're doing this nice and slow. So the next thing is, what might you do? Let's say you've got quite an abstract word like thing. It turns out one of the things that's really useful, and we'll talk about why in a minute, is to make it more specific. So there's a sense of something that's abstract, maybe that the client actually doesn't know the more detailed information somehow. And so by making it more specific, they start to learn something about that word or phrase. And the key question for doing that is what kind of, which we all know, it's one of the classic Clean questions. So just to demonstrate that, would someone be up for a very fast game of asking me? So would anyone be up for asking me a very fast game of?
This field or that field?
So Tim?
Hang on a sec. Okay, muted.
Yes. Sorry. So would someone be up for a really quick game of just asking me what kind of a lot? Anyone like to volunteer?
I will.
Claire, right, thank you very much.
There you go.
Right, it's really easy. You just say what kind of, a lot. So I'm going to start with, so I would like something.
What kind of something?
A food,
What kind of food?
Italian food.
What kind of Italian?
What kind of Italian food? Pizza.
And what kind of pizza?
A veggie pizza.
What kind of vegetable?
That's pizza, yeah, with mushrooms. I think mushrooms, peppers, and onion would be good. So I'll stop you there.
Okay.
So did everyone notice what happened as you asked what kind of a lot? Started with something.
I want something. Or I would like something.
I want something. And obviously I was being a bit difficult. But you notice what we've ended up with?
You wanted
More and more specific. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, vegetarian pizza.
Exactly. And it's like, is anyone getting a little bit hungry thinking about mushrooms, peppers, onions? To give us hot. It's a hot pizza. If you ask what kind of, I would have said, oh, it's hot. It's fresh out the oven. Right.
May I ask a question?
Okay. So what?
Oh, hang on. Sorry. Question.
Sorry, I just had a question. I noticed that Claire was breaking the two words up some of the time. So when you said a veggie pizza, she said what kind of veggie, and you brought the two words back together again. And I wasn't quite sure. I probably would have done what Claire did and tried to dig onto one part of that concept, as it were. And I'm not quite sure how that fits. I mean, I'm quite new to all of this, so I'm kind of curious as to at what point you hone down on one part of the concept and at what point you carry on delving into the whole.
It might be easier to answer that later.
Sure. Okay, that's fine. I've probably jumped in where.
No. It's a really, really good question. It's only, I think some of the things we'll cover later will make it a bit easier to explain. But,
cool.
but very loosely, if you're asking like repeated questions about the same thing, it's better to keep it on exactly the same thing. And the thing effectively was the food, which became the pizza, with the mushrooms and thing on. You start going off on what kind of mushroom. For example, you start exploring the mushroom, and now it's not the pizza anymore.
Okay.
So there's like a real kind of precise keeping your attention on exactly the thing that is becoming more specific.
Okay.
And it's not wrong to ask about the veggies or anything, but it's about knowing very precisely where you're putting your attention or inviting the client's attention.
Interesting.
So yes.
In a way, that's a subtext behind the session, is developing an absolutely razor-like focus on what you're asking about, and keeping that in mind even as clients bring up all sorts of interesting, shiny, different stuff. Not that you're never going to ask about the shiny stuff, but you want to be very clear about where your focus is and whether it's time to move it to something different or not. So what might be useful about the fact that in the matter of literally 5 questions, one can get a whole lot of people all busy kind of thinking hard about how lovely it would be to have a nice pizza right now, and probably experiencing, some saliva and the whole thing. The point is that if you can help your client to get more specific about what they're saying, of course they'll learn more, as Paul says, but also the more specific you go, the more likely their senses start getting involved. And the more their senses get involved, the more their body is part of the whole act. And so you've got body and mind involved. You're going to get more different routes to the brain being used, and the sense of what they are talking about with the different senses. That's going to mean that content is more easily accessible and is more memorable. So all of that means that the client is likely to have access to a greater variety of resources, more creativity, better chance of working out how to move things forward. So it's definitely useful for them. But it's also useful for the facilitator, because if you're just keeping your focus on, I'm going to get this more specific, that means you're not spending your time thinking, oh, which of the 12 main clean questions, or 9 or however many you reckon there are, should I ask now? It brings the number down considerably and takes some of the that extra pressure off of you as facilitator, which should mean you've got more attention on your client, which should mean you're picking up little clues and cues, and you can build them into what you are asking. So it's good in every way to do all of that. You got any tips about doing it, Paul?
Yeah. So what you notice as you get more sensory as a facilitator, you can test that with a question just in your mind. Say, could I draw this? Which you can substitute with other senses. You know, can I hear it, taste it, smell it, feel it? But you quite often draw it is the one that's easiest. So when I said car, you think, well, yeah, I can kind of draw a car, but chances that it's anything like Paul's car, nah. Whereas if I say, you know, draw a silver Nissan Qashqai, assuming you know what that looks like, you could in principle draw a pretty good version of it. So that's just a little test you can have in the back of your head for, am I kind of getting close to the senses? Am I getting specific to a level that's probably useful?
So another thing that you can do in terms of making things more specific is ask about location. So 2 classic clean questions: where is X, or whereabouts is X? And it is fantastic in terms of getting more specific, to the extent that we would say it's probably your number one kind of question to ask. Location is crucial to human beings. Location, or space, and force are the only 2 metaphors that turn up in every language that's been studied, which tells you space is very important for people. And so asking where or whereabouts as your first question to start, or first couple of questions to start getting more specific, is a very good plan, provided you think that the person that you're working with has got a chance of accessing what the location is. And if you're working on something that involves their body or the area around their body, like emotions and feelings and states, then there's a good chance they will be able to get a location for that feeling or state. And so that's a perfect kicking off point, is to ask where, and then maybe follow up with, and whereabouts when it's there, to get still more specific. We'll do an example shortly where we do that, so you'll see us doing an example.
Yeah, and there's another, which is going to be an example. There's another question. It doesn't get used quite so much. It's a specialized question, but it does get things very specific. And that is, does X have a size or a shape? And again, if that can be a very useful question. We'll show an example of it later. But it's one of these like chili powder. You might use it once or twice very occasionally, but it's really handy.
Yeah.
And the way it works is to make things very specific. And
Magnus. Sorry.
Oops.
So Wendy.
Okay, so the issue then around what we're talking about is we are talking in a frame of working on outcomes or on resources with someone, working on stuff that they like or want more of. So we're not suggesting you do any of what we've just talked about if you choose to ask questions about a problem that they've got. Only go for problem investigation if you know what you're doing, or well experienced in clean, have got relevant training. So this is very definitely for outcomes and resources.
Yeah, and I'll add a tiny bit in there, because lots of people working more with the body and embodied things. I know Nick's on as well. So I've been doing a bit. But there's a thing, a lot of that work where if you're noticing just what's going on, it could be problematic. So you might be asking into it. So there are some techniques when you're doing that kind of thing to like just do a little bit and then come away from it. So I'm just mentioning it in case you do
good
that
point.
kind of work. Have a chat with me, probably people like Nick, who are like, I think, probably real experts in this kind of thing. If you're in that space where problemy stuff might come up, because you need to know what to do. Don't go developing it unless you know what you're doing. Okay. Wendy.
Oh, yeah. So we've been talking about abstract to specific. That's one of the dimensions for our WordNet. The other dimension has to do with real world or metaphor. So that's what we are going to focus on for a few minutes now. So metaphor is a situation where we're using one kind of thing to represent another kind of thing. And a really useful test is, can you say it's like, or it's as though, or it's as if? So, you know, the English saying about I've got butterflies in my stomach for when you're nervous. It makes sense to say it's as though I've got butterflies in my stomach. That tells you butterflies in the stomach is a metaphor. There are no real butterflies. On the other hand, if I say I've got a sore thumb, does it make sense to say it's as though I've got a sore thumb? No. Therefore, that wasn't a metaphor. So that's a little test you can use. Beyond that, we're going to assume you have a sense of what metaphors are and already know that they're jolly good things to work with in many contexts. So what we're going to do is a quick little practice with some real world and some metaphor items so that you can just be reminded of the difference between the two. So Paul, would you reveal our first thing? Well, hey, Paul, what do you reckon? Is he a real world or is he a metaphor item? Somebody call out, please.
Real world.
Real.
Well, hey, he's real world.
I'm
real
glad
world.
to hear it.
Yeah. Okay. How about I'm over the moon?
Metaphor.
Metaphor.
Definitely. Nobody's actually over the moon. Next one, pen.
Real world.
It's real.
Brilliant. Yeah. The department's a well-oiled machine.
Metaphor.
Metaphor.
Yeah, definitely. The department's real world, but anything that's got metaphor in it, we're putting on the metaphor side. Okay. I'm torn between two choices.
Metaphor.
Metaphor.
Yeah. There's no tearing actually happening. Body isn't being torn in half. Okay. Usain Bolt won the gold medal.
Real world.
Real.
Real world, yeah, real. Restrictions were lifted.
Metaphor.
Okay, so in the world we live in at the moment, that's very likely to be used metaphorically because it's all about, you know, whether you're locked down and whether you can go out or at a given time of day, and whether those things have just changed. So you might well see a headline that says restrictions were lifted. But in actual fact, that could also be real world. Real world bollards blocking off a road, for example. If they were lifted, then one could say restrictions were lifted. So sometimes you need to pay attention to the context to work out if it's real world or metaphor. Okay. And, you know, clients will generally be giving you some context. You still may need to check. There was a time when someone was talking about shells on a beach, and everyone who heard was thinking, this in a clean training, was thinking about lovely shells, you know, very beautiful things. Actually, the person was talking about shells from, you know, firing guns and things being on a beach. But it's an unusual one to make such a big mistake. Okay, I want to be happy. Metaphor or real world?
Metaphor.
And you say it's as though I want to be happy?
Real world.
I'd say it's real world. But I think it's really not specified, is it? Okay, what we got next? Falling in love.
Metaphor.
Metaphor.
Yeah, definitely. Both the falling and the in. The word in gets used metaphorically in more than 100 different ways, literally. So that suggests love is a container and you're falling into that container of love. So definitely metaphoric. What we got? My foot is itchy.
Can be both.
Real world.
Yeah, it could. Many things could be both. Most usually that one, I think, would be real world.
So would it make a difference if it was itchy feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got itchy feet. Yes, because the person wouldn't be busy using their hand to relieve a physical itch on their foot. Well, so far as there are weird things with all this stuff. I've got cold feet. They've recently discovered people's feet really are cold when they have that metaphorical sensation. Weird, it's all how one's body gets involved. Okay, but last one here. I need to think outside the box.
Metaphor.
Definitely metaphor, unless you're sitting inside a great big box and you can't think and you're saying you need to get out of it to think. But yeah, metaphor. Okay, so you get that distinction. So that's going to be our second parameter. Paul, you got a tip?
Yeah, so the reason why we use this, and I encourage you to practice it, like just really listening to what people are saying, or even playing back recordings or looking through text you read in a magazine for what are metaphors, is, again, it's how would you use it? And one of the things that means you think the client's going to metaphor easily is that they actually gave you the metaphor in the first place, and you actually heard it, and then you ask them a question about it. What actually happens to a lot of people is a lot of facilitators is they don't hear the metaphor, and so they think it's really hard to get the client into metaphor. It's just they're a bit subtle. So what we're encouraging here is to keep practicing that. So again, you start to develop this just little thing in the back of your mind that's going, oh yeah, metaphor, 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 real world, real world, real world. So that you're now at choice to pick out what something might be, both important to the client, like relevant to their outcome, and metaphorical, and then you just ask about it. And miraculously, the client starts talking about metaphors. What we also find is if you aim to get more specific, like we did before, what happens is clients quite often give you a metaphor without you asking. There's something about as you get specific, as you get near the senses, they kind of go, and they stretch for something else, and the something else is a metaphor. So that's what we're about to do now, is join the two together, because it's like stepping stones. You sort of come from an abstract thing, and as it gets more and more specific, people can describe it better, and they're likely to come up with a metaphorical description at some point, particularly as you get more specific. So it will show you the two put together. So this is actually what the word net is. It's the combination of these two things. And we're going to quickly explain it, do a demo, and we'll see if we've got time for the breakout rooms, because we are running very tight. Let's go. So the two dimensions you've already seen, we're putting them in a sort of a griddy sort of thing, like, so you don't have to get it right, just putting it roughly in the right place is a way of training your brain to notice these two distinctions. And we've got some variations. You can do some very interesting things to do with embodied sensory information as well, but we're not going to go into that at the moment. So what we're going to do with this example is start with a feeling or a state that you'd like more of. So we'll demo this in a second. We've got instructions on the side. There'll be an answer. You have to make a judgment about which of those words and phrases are most important or relevant to the client and their outcome. So you do a first filter. So kind of at this stage, just ignore things that aren't relevant, catch the ones that are. And those ones you catch, you either literally on a piece of paper put into the word net, or in your mind kind of do a quick, is that abstract or specific? Is that metaphorical or real world? So you kind of classified it. Once you've got a few of those words sitting around, you can make a choice about which one you ask about. They're all important. And the way you'll choose is if you've got something metaphoric and it's important, you ask about that. And generally, anything that's abstract, you go for making more specific. And then we'll repeat round. And what we encourage, obviously in real sessions, you can use whatever questions you like, but we're going to stick to the questions that we've said today. So we've got the ones that make things more specific. That's all you've got. So what kind of, where is, and whereabouts, or does X have a size or shape? That's all we're going to do. And we'll see if we get metaphor just with getting things more specific and listening. So Wendy and I are going to do a little demo. I'm going to show you how this works and Wendy's going to ask me the questions. We've got it pre-prepared, you can see. So I'm going to give a canned answer, but what we're going to do is ask you where you think you would put that phrase. Is it abstract, specific, or is it real world metaphor? So both dimensions now. Okay.
Okay, and I've put the instructions into the chat so that if we get time to go into breakout rooms, you have them to hand. Okay, so what's a feeling or state that you'd like more of?
I'd like to be more confident.
Okay, so what do you reckon? Is that metaphoric or real world?
Real world.
Yeah, real world. And how specific or abstract?
Abstract.
Abstract. We could make a shed load of mistakes and assumptions about that. Okay, so we're going to put our focus on getting more specific. You generally want to work down this net and then to the right. So to get more specific, if we can, we want to ask a location question. Is confidence something likely to be something that he feels in or around his body?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So there's a good chance he can answer a location question. So let's try that. And where is that more confident?
It's in my back.
Okay. Metaphoric or real world?
Metaphoric.
Do you reckon?
I
think it's real world. It's a real world location. So it's on the real world side of it. Is it more or less specific than more confident?
More specific.
Definitely more specific, yeah. Mm. But it's not all the way such that we could draw it. People have a lot of back. It could be anywhere in that back. So let's see if we can get that one step more specific with another location question. And whereabouts in your back is that more confident?
It's kind of along my spine.
So are we still in real world?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Are we still more specific?
Down.
Yeah, brilliant.
Specific.
Definitely more specified. We're pretty close to being able to draw that. It still could be at somewhere different on the spine, but we're getting close. But we haven't got any attributes for confident other than knowing about the location. We don't know anything more about it. So before we do anything else, let's go for some attributes. So what kind of confident is that confident along your spine?
It's straight and also flexible.
Okay. Right. What do you reckon, real world or metaphor?
Metaphor.
Do you reckon? Could we say it's like it's straight or it's like it's flexible?
Yeah. Real world.
I would say it's real world and it's attached. It's both of them are attached to the more confident, making it more specified. But can we draw it? Nah. We need something more if we're going to be able to draw it. But now that we've got some attributes and we've got a location, the thing is more specified. It's getting pretty close to your client being able to come up with a metaphor. So this is a good moment to bring out that size or shape question. Size or shape makes things more specific, but it very often tips a person across into metaphor. So let's try it. And we're only going to say those most specific attributes back in asking the question. So does straight and also flexible have a size or a shape?
Yeah, it's like a tree. And yeah, then if I had that, I wouldn't be flustered in front of my work colleagues.
Okay, so the tree, is that tree metaphoric or real?
Metaphoric.
Definitely. So we're into metaphor. Way hey. And now we've got this bit about I wouldn't be flustered by my work colleagues. Is that metaphor? Nah. So here's exactly, this is what clients do. They give you a nice metaphor, a tree, and then they dangle stuff about being flustered or not by colleagues to take your attention. So with WordNet, basically that falls through the holes. We're not interested. We are not going to ask anything more about it. We let it sit on the real world side and ignore it for the moment. We might go back at the very end of the work when he's got his more confidence all sorted and well established, and check whether what happens now in situations where he used to be flustered, just to make sure that it's all a done deal. But we're not going to ask any questions about it now. We got a tree to focus on. Is tree very specified?
No.
No, we could make big mistakes if we tried drawing that tree. So we're going to find out. And what kind of tree is that tree?
That's an oak tree.
So that's closer. We could get closer to drawing it. We could still make fairly large mistakes. So let's ask one more question to get more specified. What kind of oak tree is that oak tree?
It's a grown-up oak tree.
Okay, so we got an attribute attached to our oak tree. And by now, really, I'd say we kind of at or possibly beyond that line of where we could draw it and have a reasonable go at it. It's not that we're going to draw it, but it's just a way of testing that we've got a kind of enough specificity, enough attributes for the person to have something that will remain with them, won't just fizzle out into space. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Brilliant.
Yes, yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, so we are heading into break. It'd be very nice just for a minute or two just to find out what happened for people. We know this is like we're cramming more than we should do into 50 minutes. It's to give everyone a bit of a taste and something you can go and practice. But anything interesting, noteworthy happening in the breakout rooms that you'd like to share for a minute?
I really like the grid, Paul, although it takes an extra bit of headspace to use the grid actively whilst I was working with the person I was working with, but we did get to a metaphor. Yeah, both ways round. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, and actually I should say it's one of the things we've noticed on the training, getting people to really slow down. Maybe use a tool, but they slow down the questions, do a bit of thinking with a tool like this. It's a bit clunky, and you sort of do it, and it kind of goes in and it goes faster, and then you don't need the tool anymore, and suddenly your brain is just magically doing it.
Lovely. So
yeah.
These are like scaffolding training wheel type things that you practice, and then it's in you, and then you move on to the next tool that you kind of bring in.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Cool.
Sorry. I was just going to, because if you're doing this if you're using this WordNet and you're in a room-based environment and you're doing this, then you can have this piece of paper and you can look at your net and you can almost write where they fall on that grid. When I'm working, I'm not in a room. I don't have pen and paper. I'm outside in the field with the horses. How would you advise that I get to grips with being able to use that WordNet without a piece of paper?
I think it's actually a practice. Sorry, Wendy. I was going to say it's a practice tool, similar to the last thing. I'd say on your own time, like get a newspaper article and classify some words. Do it with a transcript, listen to a client, do a practice session with someone where you say, I'm going to take my time over every question, just so you build the muscle. Then when you go with a real client, you don't need the paper.
Yeah.
every bit of practice you do, you'll be that bit better at noticing the metaphor and that bit better at specific abstract. And
listen to a chat show on TV, on radio, and be doing it. But I have to say, I reckon that it would be entirely doable to take a little set of Post-its with one to wherever the horses were, got a pocket that size, little pencil, pen. I think you could probably make some little notes to, while you were getting used to doing it.
Okay, yeah.
No, I'd like to ask a question too.
Go for it, Maria.
Well, we went through and asked questions in turns, and to me it seemed that all the answers were in metaphor, and yet the original wish was to have more time, and that's kind of referring to the real world. And I was wondering, we ran out of time, how could one twist it around so that we would really grab the problem or the outcome, which I just sensed it was related to real world.
Okay, so I mean, you always can work in real world terms. That's a nice thing about clean. People don't have to be in metaphor. Police can use it for interviewing witnesses and so on, and they don't want metaphors, that's for sure. But often by putting the piece of work into metaphor, you hugely increase the range of possible ways forward, the creativity of the individual in working out a way of dealing with whatever they're working on. And so you can do the entire piece of work in metaphor, even though the person is probably not doing the, oh yes, well, I've just said that and that means this in the real world. They actually will have an understanding of how it would be in the real world. And you could always check that out at the very end of the piece of work in real terms. So, when it's this metaphor and this happens and this, then what happens to you needing more time at work, so that, they can expressly say it. I've done this even with young, like 13-year-olds, without working with the whole work in metaphor, and they can get the point or how it comes together. In this particular case, we were just going for a feeling or a state that the person wanted more of. So we were, we weren't getting into depths of other kinds of outcome, but it should still be perfectly possible. And of course, in real world situations, you're allowed to use other questions. You're not limited to just 4 questions, which also makes a difference.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, and on the topic of more time, we would love it because we knew we'd crammed more than we should have done in 50 minutes. But hopefully, we've recorded it. So if you want to drop us your email or something, we'll send people the video when we put it up somewhere, so you can play it again and take a bit more time over it. I've dropped our email address and Wendy's phone number as well into the chat and Wendy's website. And it's probably worth mentioning, because obviously it's part of the training. And Wendy, I think you're starting your training?
Yeah, within the next couple of weeks, we're starting the next training, all the way from the beginning through to all the essentials that you need for using clean language and clean space. So if anyone's interested, send me an email. And I always offer a discount for people who've been to a session that we've done somewhere, and it would be lovely to have any of you join us, or any friends or relations. We can also send you, along with the link for the recording, a copy of David Grove's Feeling to Metaphor process. And if you look at, what we've been talking about and his process for that, you'll see why it's such a very good process that he invented. So we'd send that to you as well. I wish we had so much longer, but we haven't. So I suppose we'd best stop. I mean, I'm happy to stay in this room if anyone wants to ask more questions or talk or anything. Paul, I don't know if you can or want to, but
I'm
at least...
happy. I think we're meant to go back to the main room, but we're quite happy to hang out here for a little while if you want to ask anything else, or feel free to, it's been very lovely having you, and go back to the main room. That's all good too. So
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
so much. That was great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.